Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO at neXtgen Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, a big thanks to our three fantastic sponsors. Allflex, part of MSD, perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia, offers one of New Zealand and Australia's largest livestock product portfolios with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heinegger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heinegger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. ProA Livestock Equipment have been delivering industry-leading livestock handling systems to producers across Australia, New Zealand and beyond for the last 25 years to improve on-farm safety, efficiency and profitability. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. You're with Ferg. Great to have you listening along. Fantastic to be at the end of 2025. If you're listening to these episodes as they come out, we're now in between Christmas and New Year's. We thought we'd take this opportunity for me to provide a few thoughts. We do this at the end of most years when it all lines up, and it's lined up this year. Just before we get into what I'm going to talk about today, I just really want to have a massive shout out to all of you listeners out there. Thanks very much for entrusting your time with us. It's awesome to think there's 3,000 odd people every week listening along to what we've got to say all over the globe. It's allowed great connections with great people all over the place. It's really an absolute highlight of what we do here at neXtgen Agri, this Head Shepherd podcast. So yeah, fantastic. You've just heard from our sponsors, but a massive thank you to Heinegger, MSD/Allflex and ProA, three amazing companies that do amazing things in their field. Great to have their trust and support in supporting Head Shepherd, allowing us to bring it to you each week. And that's, we really do appreciate their fantastic support and hope that you all out there support them in return for getting this information on their checkbook, essentially. A big shout out to Sophie Barnes. Sophie actually runs the podcast. You've heard from Sophie various times throughout the podcast history. She's the producer of this, the brains behind the show. She sets all the interviews up and does all the hard work to make sure it sounds good each week. She's the one who's on to me if my sound's not good enough and tells me off if I record in a hire car and it's not very good. But that means that you get a better listener experience, which is the point of a podcast. So yeah, massive thank you to you, Sophie, and hopefully you don't edit this bit out and hopefully you leave it in there. Today I wanted to talk about, I guess, what we do as a team again, but just talk about, I guess, the experiences we see out there. We've now been in business 8 years. I've been sort of doing what I do for 20 years and have had the opportunity to see businesses change, sheep change, cattle change over that period. And I guess really wanted to, talk through what that feels like for those farmers and for us watching it happen on the fence. We have this beautiful opportunity, I guess, where we go around a few times each year to each of these places. Unfortunately, if you're on those farms, you have to watch your sheep change, which is obviously more difficult than when you're actually bouncing in and out like we do. So we kind of jump in, do a mating program, come back, and all of a sudden, bang, those progeny are there, and get to scoot around and see those great changes. Those on the ground are obviously doing the hard work, don't get to see the rapid changes, but do get to feel how that changes over time. And this is both commercial farmers and stud breeders. And we've seen real changes over time. And I guess I just wanted to run through them today because we have thrown the gauntlet out there, or thrown the challenge out there that in the livestock industry we should be doing 4 or 5% genetic gain. That's what is available to us if we do our job properly. And I guess what we're seeing is that businesses are doing that. They're achieving that. And that's what I want everyone striving towards. Everyone out there should be moving towards that genetic gain. And there's all sorts of excuses made by why that may or may not be able to happen. But I guess I just want to talk through some businesses that are doing that. And it's all about, if we think about that breeder equation, where there's a whole heap of components that change genetic gain, but the one that we have the maximum control over is accuracy of selection. So our ability to select the right animals to go into the next generation is the thing that we get to control the most. So that's the rams and bulls we buy and the heifers and young replacement females that we keep or hoggets that we retain in those businesses, as well as which animals go out the back end. What are we culling animals for? What are animals leaving a property for? They're the three key decisions that we get to make every year or a few times a year, and they're the ones that control our genetic gain. We can do things like speed up generation intervals, so mating new lambs is a great opportunity. If you're not mating animals to calve at 2-year-old, then that's also a big opportunity, but most people are onto that now in systems where it's possible or conditions where it's possible. So, yeah, we can do some things to speed up generation interval. We can keep only young sheep and sell others as restockers or young cattle. So there's ways we can do that. But fundamentally, that impacts our profitability on a commercial business, in a stud business differently. But if we're moving animals through quickly in a commercial business, we have to make sure we're doing the economics well to make sure that is a good economic decision, because it isn't free to raise an animal through to its first reproductive event. It's actually quite expensive to get them through to there. So we have to make sure if we're doing more of that we're actually just getting the money out the back end of that with high enough prices for our animals, our sale animals. But that's a conversation for a different day. I do want to talk through this 4% thing and why it's so important and why we see businesses striving towards it, because it's because inflation sits, depending on when and where, but at the moment we're sitting between 1.5% and 2%, maybe even greater than that in different markets, different environments, or different countries, sorry. And so what does that mean? That means if we're not making at least 2% genetic gain or making 2% productivity gain somewhere, and what we've seen is a lot of places that productivity gain has actually slowed. So our other ways of making more money out of businesses has slowed down. And so genetic gain, as I've written about before, is kind of the last show in town and I would argue the best show in town. So if we're not getting that 2%, we're actually going backwards in real terms. So 2% should be the minimum target for your genetic gain, and we need to know enough information to know whether you're doing that, and if you're not, how we can fix that. And that's the big opportunity. And I guess, yeah, really, what are those businesses doing out there that are achieving that? And we're seeing more and more people going, right, we want to grab this big problem and we want to hook into it, or this big opportunity, we want to hook into it. And they're exciting businesses that we get to work with and really do love those opportunities to take businesses from that 0.51% genetic gain or even 0% genetic gain through to that 4% genetic gain. It's nothing more exciting than watching that happen and watching the animals change as well. So what does that look like? I guess in sheep, it's a little bit faster than cattle, just through their reproductive rate and reproductive speed. But I guess in that first year, and this is the challenge with genetics, and so I just want to talk people through what this feels like in a commercial business. First year, you buy a new ram team. So we would sit down, we would design a selection index, work out what that is, go to the ram catalogues that are aligned with the wool type that you like, or the carcass type you like if you're in the meat sheep, or if shedding is your thing or whatever. So we find the type of sheep that you're after, and then look at which ram or bull sellers are in that realm, and so then that becomes our starting set. We then often work out very clearly what your breeding objective is, and then we go through and put that into practice by running that index over, or a neXtselect index based on your objective over those catalogues. That helps us highlight which ones have got more animals in your zone than others, and that doesn't mean we have to go to one place, but that helps us work out which driveways we're going up. And then so we've got that. So go and get that new ram or bull team. Obviously, first year, all of the reproduction is really controlled by what you've got at home, and so you can see a slight shift in reproduction or total lambs weaned and maybe calves weaned if there's a shift in survival, and we've seen that in sheep in some instances where a vastly superior carcass animal, for example, has come in and given that lamb a bit more vigour, so we get a survival lift in year one. So we actually can get some runs on the board straight from that first lamb crop. We then start seeing that weaning weight coming through, and that's whether it's cattle or sheep. So those, if that's been an objective, and often it is, to get some growth, because growth is speed in a business. And so we'll see that lift in weaning weight from that shift. And these are all subtle early days, because you're going, oh, maybe that weaning weight's from we've had a slightly better season. So yeah, the lambs are better this year, Bill next door's also got better lambs this year. So you go, maybe that's not the animals. But if you've done a progeny test, then you can separate out whether it's the animals or not. But often we want people just to make a significant shift in their ram team and move towards that new horizon as fast as possible, because it's that same old thing that I've said before. When's the best time to start making genetic gain is 30 years ago, and the next best time is today, like planting a tree. And so the more we do, the faster we can go. But obviously we work within budget constraints, and as everyone has to. But anyway, so first year you get that slight potential lift in survival, and then that lifts through to a weaning weight. Depending on your production system, for your mating hoggets, you start seeing a few of those hoggets getting more of those hoggets pregnant, a bit easier to get growth in those animals. And then you sort of got a bit of a lull period where the next year is kind of rinse and repeat really because you've still got those growing animals. You're seeing these animals head towards their mating weights better, so a bit more growth, holding their condition better, slightly better. But remembering these animals, these F1s, these first cross, are still 50% of your old genetics. And then you generate another crop of them while you're sort of waiting for them to hit the ground. And then you see that maiden joining. So that first time that those new genetics, those 50% new genetics, go to the bull or go to the ram. And that's where you start seeing that lift in reproductive rate, if that's been a target. You start seeing that lift in wool quality, if that's what we went to, if that was what we went for, or you start seeing that drop in micron, or that improvement in feet, and how many animals we're culling for foot shape. So you start seeing these subtle signs that things are getting better. And then, you sort of got this 2-3 year period where you're going, I think this is working, and things are slightly getting better. We see people getting out into that 4 or 5 year period, and that's where you've got a few generations of these new genetics in there that you're saying, wow, these sheep are actually holding their condition better. I'm able to feed them a little bit less, or start feeding them a bit later, or they're just holding their condition on the hill better than they were. I can do different things with these animals. This is actually starting to change. We start seeing things like dag reduce, if that's been part of our objective, and we're going, well, we're normally under these conditions we'd have a lot of dag. We've still got some dag, but there's less in the mob. So you start seeing these things starting to compound, and a lot of them aren't direct, like just a weaning weight lift or a lift in scanning percentage or weaning percentage, but they are there as well. But often it's the subtle things that are the most surprising. It's that condition score holding, that reduction in labour through reduced the number that need to be dagged, the number that need to be drenched, the number that might have foot problems. And then, so that's that sort of nice period. And then you get out to 7-8 years, and these are sort of businesses that we would have started with a while ago, and you've seen a fundamental shift in your animals, and you kind of can't even, you sort of shudder to think what it was like to farm that old type. And because you've got these animals that are exploding through, once they give them the opportunity, they'll grow when the season allows. They'll hold condition when things are a little bit tough. They're actually reduced. If you're in a foot health challenge area, you've actually seen a really big reduction in how much energy you're having to spend in controlling those foot problems. We've seen people over that period stop filling up their zinc bars and stop having to worry about the feet, because there's just not limpers out there. And these are flocks that used to have big lifts. And you're seeing lots more lambs coming out of these systems. So I'll never forget one of our clients saying that this year there was a whole unit load more lambs coming off our property. So that's not just a ute load or whatever. There's 600 odd lambs or whatever that were additional to where they were 4 or 5 years prior, through putting some of these selection strategies into place by using the right data from both ram selection, ewe selection, and cull decisions. And so you see these big lifts in potential productivity, and it doesn't mean it all flows through to the bank. We all think that on extra lamb is worth, or in this year might be, could be $180, $200, $300 lamb, but that lamb costs you money, because by generating that extra lamb, you eat more feed, and so it's not free, but it is an $80 or $100 lamb these sort of years, in terms of its impact on profit, and so it is significant. You're getting hundreds more of them. That's a significant lift in the budget, and conversely, if you kind of run the counter argument, if we hadn't made those changes, we're sitting there with budgeting for this many lambs, and we're only getting 70 or 80% of them, and so generally this is what we see happen out there. We see these lifts across all areas. Obviously, the lifts happen in the areas that you're focused on. You don't get extra extra wool if you're focused on extra lambs or whatever, although you might, because there are some unintended consequences of productivity gain. And I think the one that strikes me most is the one around just those animals that respond to the environment without punishing at an area at a time when it's a bit tough. They're the ones that don't respond as much, and so hold their condition, and that changes how you can manage those animals. And that's across cattle and sheep. Obviously, sheep again are a bit faster to move, just based on their reproductive rate. There's also the invisibles in terms of what's happening in their. Like we can select for really good worm egg count breeding values. What does that mean? We start seeing, as particularly in businesses that we work with that are really monitoring their worm egg counts, we start seeing them being able to drop those adult drenches out, only drench young sheep every now and again, and so really change their drenching protocol. We're careful around that. There's some people have just gone cold turkey on drenching adult sheep, and that's great, particularly in stud sense. That's awesome to see, so that we put some pressure on those animals, and animals that can't handle it go back out to be commercial animals or whatever, not producing the next generation. But you do see those changes in in those management systems that you've had to have. Obviously, all these things get a bit confused because you've got sheep in better condition, therefore they're fighting worms better. So is it their worm egg count breeding value, or is it their condition score breeding value? They're all intertwined, obviously. So you don't see all of those. The other thing that we often see is just things like flies. If you've reduced dag, you've reduced wrinkle. If you're in a merino game, or just reduced dag in any game. Things like we're not having to use the same set of chemicals that we had to, or we can get away with that one click at tailing and then not put other stuff on before those animals are gone. And if we're selecting hard on our wool colour breeding values, we can take those body strike issues, reduce them down as well. So there's a whole heap of different ways that this can compound. And I guess the story I'm trying to convey is that these make material differences to you and your staff in terms of the jobs that you're now doing, and the opportunities that freedom from the grind of sorting out diseases and problems in sheep and cattle, or more sheep, I suppose, in terms of diseases. But those animals that just want to thrive rather than are a challenge to think about how I'm going to get these animals back up, to get them back in calf or get them back in lamb. What am I doing with my management to get that right? And always thinking about, what else have I got to do for these animals to get them up? Whereas if we shift that thinking and we shift towards these animals that actually are more resilient, are more resistant to disease, there's a lot of your thinking is about, right, how do I can now split that paddock in half to get a mob size advantage, or I can start reducing my joining length because I've got a lot more lambs. I can put some ewes to a terminal, or some heifers or some cows to a terminal, because my reproductive rate's up, and I've actually got more replacement females coming through than I would normally have. I've got options now, and I think that snowball is massive. That once you go from I'm chasing my tail because these animals aren't suited to this property or aren't dealing with these seasons, to I've got an animal that wants to be here and is thriving, the opportunities for you to go, right, let's reduce mob size down. We know that'll improve our weaning rates. Let's focus in on managing those twin bearing ewes to the best of our advantage, because we've now got time, because we're not chasing flies or feet or dag. We're actually got time to think about how we do this more strategically in our business. So while I'm purposefully overplaying the impact of genetics on a business, I think it's true. I think our complacency in some circumstances has enabled us to consider that this is the way that you need to farm to run animals, whereas those that we're working with out there that have made the shift, that have made the change, are changing the way that they utilise their management, utilise their thought, because they've got the opportunity now. And I think that's the exciting thing for me, and that's what we love seeing out there. There's been a whole heap of work go into that from stud breeders as well as commercial farmers. It's changing the jobs we do. So while we're now having to maybe condition score and record that information rather than dag animals, and so we're still doing jobs. We're not, but they're more enjoyable jobs, and they're jobs that have a really positive outcome to them. So we're condition scoring these ewes so that we can find the ones that are doing better, so that we can remove some of those ones that aren't holding condition. If we know enough information about those animals, we can do that with really strategically with things like NextGen. And we're in this different headspace, and that's where I want people to be in 2026. I want people who are striving towards a headspace where we're chasing these opportunities and we're changing the sheep and the cattle in a way that means we can really look for other ways in the business to keep tweaking it. There's a group of farmers out there who are achieving amazing things in the sheep and cattle businesses, and every opportunity, everyone listening, and lots of people that aren't, have the opportunity to be exactly the same to them. It's not about where you're farming. It's not about what you're farming. It's about the approach you take to the decisions you're making. And I think, hats off to all of you out there who are doing these great things, and I know there's lots of you that are. Really applaud the way that you approach your business, the way that you make great decisions on the rams or bulls you're purchasing, the heifers or replacement females you're putting into those flocks and herds, the way you're really strategic around you cull those older animals out of that system rather than just the ones that look at you along the way, the way you then use that opportunity to change your system. So you can't just change your genetics and leave the system the same, because there's opportunities in that, and you reduce your mob sizes down, you might reduce your joining length, you might start using those terminals, you change your flock structure, you find ways to, maybe those ewes are leaving at 4-year-old because you've got a restocker who will buy them all the time, or same, and maybe in your cattle business, you find ways to really to optimize that. You then got a bit more time to invest in what I'm going to do, some pasture improvement, or I'm going to change the way that I use my annuals to eat the next opportunity out of this, because now I've got these animals that want to be here, and we can do that. So I think there's fantastic opportunities, and it's again, when was the best time to start? A long time ago. When's the next best time? That's right now. And for in New Zealand, we've got ram buying upon us, but in Australia, we're only 6 months away again from going around again to ram and bull buying, and it pretty much costs you the same money to do the things that you're doing but doing them differently. It's not about we're going to start having to pay twice as much for bulls or rams. It's about, right, when I go to do this job, I'm going to use the best information possible. And at the moment, and forever probably, these animals aren't more expensive than the ones that have got no information and we have no idea about. They're actually the same price, and we saw that in the ram sales this year. That it was kind of irrelevant whether that animal was going to change your business or not, linked to its price. Within studs, obviously there was a link, but across studs, definitely no link. And so you can make these shifts without having to budget a lot more for those genetic purchases, or spend that much more on how you select your animals. You're still going through the process, and it's just using a bit more rigor to do that. So, I think there's really cool opportunities. And I guess, and I've written about this before and probably talked about it before, I think all the indications are that red meat's looking great for a number of years going forward. These are the years where we've got the opportunity to invest and make lifts up that will serve us in the years when maybe prices go back a bit, and hopefully, obviously, all fingers and toes crossed that we see sustained great levels of pricing. But when the things do change, or when the seasons go against us, which have been around in different places, how do we use these good years to set ourselves up to have the right animals to handle our production systems, to handle a different pricing scenario? We have this big opportunity in the industry, and no one's going to hand it to any of us. It's the people out there who have just made their own decisions about, we're going to make a change, and we're going to make positive change, and we're going to continue to make those positive changes. There's no external force can help us do that. It's us getting out there and making that shift, because end of the day, our businesses depend on being really, really good at what we do. And I think there's just this big opportunity in this next few years to make some decisions that might have been harder to make when things are down, and it's really hard to see positivity when prices are low or the season's against you. But at the moment, I think there is a time where we can actually to make some really good decisions and set ourselves up for our future, for our kids who might want to come farming or whatever, set ourselves up for a great great future. So I'm going to leave it there. Thanks very much for listening in 2025. If you're listening to this live, have a great New Year's. Yeah, we really do enjoy bringing this to you each week, and thanks to all those people that have reached out over 2025. I had some great emails, I had some great conversations from people at conferences. I do love every one of those chats about people telling me which episode they've really enjoyed. So keep those things coming. All the best for 2026. It's going to be a great year. Cheers. Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our 3 fantastic sponsors. Heinegger, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Allflex Livestock Intelligence, part of MSD Animal Health, offer an extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. ProWay Livestock Equipment offer turnkey solutions from design through to professional installation and specialise in facilities that are tailored to your specific operation for all livestock species. We thank these 3 great companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.